And it's going to be these small glimpses of change that we start to recognize. And then we see, hey, things are beginning to change. But
welcome back to the PCOS Holistic Coach podcast with me, Dr. Ami Patel, pharmacist, fellow sister, and coach. This podcast is an easy to listen to resource for your busy on the go life. You will learn how you can live a healthier and happier life with PCOS from real conversations about managing PCOS and the symptoms with amazing guest speakers. Welcome back to another episode on the PCOS Holistic Coach YouTube channel and podcast. Today we have a guest with us, Dr. Anita Bangale. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Ami, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a great conversation. A little bit about Dr. Bangale. She is an emergency physician, certified mindset coach, international TEDx speaker. She's served as a medical director in the emergency department during the COVID pandemic. She still continues to support her patients in the ED, connecting with them through empathy and compassion. She's also a certified life coach and founder and creator of Diya Coaching, a life coaching center focusing on teens, young professionals, and moms. She also works as an alumni mentor for the Jay Shetty Certification School. She currently provides services as a physician through telemedicine as well, supporting people through anxiety and depression. She's given numerous talks for schools, universities, youth groups, and physician groups and corporate groups. She lives in Texas with her husband and 3 daughters, and she aims to spread joy by improving and maximizing self-worth and confidence, and believes in magnificent, ignitable power of each person's inner light. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, I think it's great to have your perspective on the topic today because of all the things you do and all the people you've supported. So it's great to take that experience into our conversation. Yeah. So let's get started with that. What is your definition of a magical morning, and why is it important to have a morning routine?
I think that a magical morning routine is really beneficial when we think about self-care. I think so much right now, self-care is this buzzword, and we associate it with spending or consuming or trying to purchase something that's then going to make us feel good. And I think the reason I really, really enjoy talking about like a morning routine or a magical morning or miracle morning is because it's something that's free, where we can use the resources within us and around us in the time of even 5 or 6 minutes to be able to really transform the rest of the day. So I think it's something that we can do for ourselves, that we don't have to think about energy expenditure in terms of having to spend money or a lot of time or other resources.
Yes. So speaking from your experience, how has a magical morning impacted your life or your day-to-day routines in terms of everything you do and balance?
Yeah, definitely. I think, since I have a shift work schedule, sometimes it's evening, sometimes it's overnight, sometimes it's day shift. It's been really, really hard to be able to kind of have some anchor of a circadian rhythm. And so I started creating just a 3-minute, 4-minute routine just to kind of anchor myself and re-center myself to understand, okay, this is the beginning of the day, regardless of what time it is outside. This is the beginning of the day. And so I found that incorporating a few basic things like breathing, a little bit of movement, it doesn't even have to be full exercise. It can just be a simple stretch, and then a little bit of writing, like whether it's one word even. And so it's like these micro dosed amounts of the same thing every day that have really helped me.
Yeah, I really like that. It's kind of like when you think about with babies, we have a bedtime routine with them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like getting them ready and aware. They don't know what time it is technically, but they know that, hey, if I do this routine, that means that I'm going to be going to sleep soon. So I guess similarly, right? I guess we grow up as adults and we kind of forget that our bodies and minds need these routines.
Exactly. Because I think for example, I have neighbors and they're, 2 and 5 years old. And no matter what season it is, even if it's light outside till 9 p.m., they are still going to sleep at a certain time. Even if it turns dark at 5 p.m., they're still going to sleep at a certain time. So I think as adults, it's great that we can look at the time and read it, but at the same time, there's so much that's still within our control in terms of how we regiment everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. And time is like, I don't know, it's like a concept we made up as humans anyway, right? But our mind and body, they don't like 10 a.m., 10 p.m., it doesn't mean much. It's the meaning we give behind it, and it could come in the form of the routines.
Yes. And I think the energy that we put into those 5 or 6 minutes in the morning or whatever that time, however you define that start of the day for you is,
Yeah.
that can really translate, that whole energy can translate into the rest of the day, into creating something that's much more impactful and meaningful and productive and joyful. And that's really the benefit because you invest 5 or 6 minutes and it pays off dividends for the rest of the day.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, what are some things? I know you mentioned like movement, writing, breathing, but can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that or where somebody can start with a morning routine if they don't have anything now?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first minute of the day, and this is something that I struggle with, is being able to not incorporate any type of device or electronic item, basically the phone, and, and taking whether it's 20 seconds, 30 seconds, ideally even just a minute to lay in solitude and just take in the moment of the quiet, of the standstill, and really kind of connect with your own thoughts as
Yeah.
opposed to letting something barge in, right? It's kind of like the noise of the surroundings. We don't need to let that impact us second one of our day, and kind of letting us just be still for a minute. So it's not really loneliness, it's just a moment of solitude in which we can really think about what we want to do, who we are, how we want the day to be. And then followed by even 30 seconds of an affirmation where we just say something, some mantra, some message, some word, something that means something to us. So whether that's something of gratitude, something like Om, something, whatever, a word that has a huge meaning for you. I think just thinking about that word and imagining that word either written on a wall, written in water, some type of imagery to really get you connected in all senses. And
Yeah.
for that to be kind of the theme for your day.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I like that because like we can have those routines and then some days like we may get woken up by like a pet or a child or a significant other and you don't get that moment to lay there. But then if you do, you can still use part of that routine or do the whole routine to kind of just reset and have that time for yourself.
Yes, exactly. And we're talking about 30 seconds to a minute for each of those two things. It's not some huge time commitment. And even if it's something that sounds like, oh, I don't have 2 minutes, okay, break it down. Spend 15 seconds.
Yeah.
It's really, if it's something that you want to do and you feel like you just don't have time to incorporate it, even 15 seconds of starting with it is going to make it more sustainable.
Yeah, so I guess that brings me to my next question. Like, does a morning routine have to be fixed or can it be flexible?
Yeah, no, I think after affirmations and the imagery of it all, I like to think about some type of movement. And so I think the order of these things doesn't matter. I think also the fourth element would be writing something. And I think whether you want to first get up and write something, if you want to first get up and just do a morning sun salutation or a breathing exercise, I think no matter what it is, it can be flexible. It's just trying to stick with it day in, day out. It's the consistency of it that should be fixed. But whatever it is, whatever your body needs, whatever your mind needs, that's what's totally flexible.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So the consistency part should be fixed, but the actual things you do during that time can be flexible based on what you need or how much time you have.
Yeah, because it definitely shouldn't be something where you feel pressure, right? It's
Yeah.
listing these things out kind of like a checklist, but it just shows you that there's many elements that you can choose from, right? It's kind of like a buffet. You get to pick what you want and you see what you prefer and what serves you the best.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of like what I tell like my clients when I'm working with them. It's like you have a toolkit, and then
Mhm.
in certain situations you may need this tool. So like certain mornings you may need to do the stretching, or other times you want to spend more time writing.
Yes, exactly. And what you think for that. Sometimes it changes based on the season of life. Sometimes it changes based on what you have going on in your life. So sometimes writing ideas may be more impactful for a whole 2 weeks, right? If you have some project coming up and you can get your deep work in those few minutes after you wake up. While kind of like that dreamlike state is still there and you're kind of still in this you are still able to kind of enter this world of imagination and these
Mm,
fluid thoughts. And so we know that there's like these creative elements that can really come out in those first few minutes.
That's a good idea. I should try that. Yeah, let the creative juices flow.
Yeah.
What are some like simple breathing exercises or techniques that people can start off with if that's not something they're doing right now?
I think if people haven't heard of box breathing, that's something
Oh,
that is hugely important.
yeah.
I think a lot of times when we first talk about it, and maybe you've seen this with your clients too, people think, oh, this is a silly breathing exercise. And then you read about it and you find out that this is what Navy SEALs use. This is what people in the military use. This is what so many people that are in super high stress situations have used to be able to control that stress reaction because it literally changes your body from going into this fight or flight system into a parasympathetic state. And that's where we have the control. And so I would recommend, in terms of breathing, whether box breathing or even just simple taking a deep breath in and releasing it. I think it can be something so simple. I think, maybe you'll agree, like sometimes we just overcomplicate it just because
Yeah.
there's options. It's like going to the grocery store and there's like 89 types of bread. Like I think it's just choose one thing that works and try it and think about it like an experiment, and, and then make some small change.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I think overcomplication is what we do, or we think. I think the other thing is like we strive to be perfect with it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm going to do 5 minutes today or 15 minutes, right? And then it's like we put all
Mhm.
this pressure on ourselves for it to be perfect. But I think you make a great point that just get started, do something. If it works for you, do more of it. If it doesn't, then change it up and do something else.
Yeah, and for me, and I know this is the case for so many people, sometimes it's that 0 to 1 that's the hardest,
Yeah.
right? The first step. And in our mind, we want to just get to that pinnacle and to the end already. And we just want to bypass that process. But sometimes if we just set a small timer, right? 15 seconds, we're like, okay, well, I can breathe for 15 seconds. Whereas if people say, well, how do you meditate for even 5 minutes? That seems like such a long time. I think the whole point is just start tiny.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like overall the theme is like being present in whatever you end up doing and not focusing on like just getting through it, because then you're not really going to see the results or feel the benefits of it, right? Hey, hey, I just wanted to interrupt the episode for a quick update. I hope you're having a great start into 2024. My one-to-one coaching reduced special holiday pricing ends at the end of January. I will also not be taking new clients after the end of January until spring 2024. If you are interested in working together or just learning more about one-to-one coaching and seeing if making holistic changes to your lifestyle to manage your hormone imbalance is right for you, then set up a free 30-minute consultation in the description. You can always contact me via email or DM me on Instagram with any questions. Now back to the episode.
Like with everything else, we're not going to see the benefit that day necessarily.
Yeah.
It's something that is about the cumulative effect over time and kind of that stacking effect of doing the same thing repetitively. And so if we keep chipping away at it, then ultimately we'll begin to see that improvement. But it may be that, okay, you start it and 3-4 days later you notice that maybe you're in a different stressful situation and you're able to just take some deep breaths just like you did in the morning to help you get through that stressful moment. And it's going to be these small glimpses of change that we start to recognize, and then we see, hey, things are beginning to change. But yeah, it's going to take time for sure, like with everything else.
I feel like for me, the hardest part about the morning is like, I feel like I have to make that time in the morning and wake up early to do it, I have to start the night before. So do you have any recommendations on like a bedtime routine or like making sure we get to bed at a decent time so that we can have that 5 to 15 minutes to ourselves in the morning?
I think we take care of our like babies, toddlers so well, right? In that department, like everybody expects to have a bedtime routine for kids, and then we just totally forgo it, like you said. I think it's important to know kind of what our normal circadian rhythm is and to be able to know, okay, I'm going to wake up with the sun and try and, let my energy slowly process down in the evening hours when the sun goes down. And I think just recognizing that and trying to be okay with that and understanding that we're not robots and that we can't just keep going. Um, and that's why I think if we just sat like in our writing in the morning, just like one thing, like just one thing that we want to accomplish that day, and that will help us feel successful in the evening as opposed to feeling like we didn't get to our 20 item to-do list. If it's just like one or two things that are actually really the most critical things of what we want to do that day, and breaking it, having broken it down into little steps, it makes us feel more successful. And it makes us feel, then our brain feels relaxed because it's excited that it did what we said we were going to do.
Yeah, it sounds like just maybe setting realistic expectations for ourselves. I feel like I need to get better with that. Like, yeah, I have like this unrealistic like thing that like I need to get through all this stuff today. And then sometimes I think back and I'm like, do I even have enough hours in the day to do all that today? Like, what am I doing?
Exactly. And then just taking that time to build in breaks.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we know, and the studies show that if we're able to build in breaks between our chunks of work, then we're actually able to accomplish more at the end of the day. But we think we have to keep going and going and going without taking breaks, and then we feel exhausted and unfulfilled.
Yeah, the tips that you suggested for like the morning routine, is that something we can do as a break or even a bedtime routine?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's almost like in reverse, we could do the same thing at night now that you bring it up. I think it's if we're able to just write down a word
Mhm.
that kind of summarizes how we felt during the day or something we want to feel for the next day, that would be great, because we know that when we go to sleep and we've thought about something, it's almost like a dress rehearsal for our mind, and it makes it more possible for that thing that we're thinking about to actually happen. So if we think about a word, if we think of some intention before we go to sleep and write it down, then we're taking all these multiple modalities, all these senses into play. And I think then certainly like a evening stretch before going to sleep is always going to be beneficial. And yeah, a moment of kind of solitude to just think about and reflect on the day. I definitely think it could be a morning routine and a bedtime routine.
Yeah, that sounds good. I guess at the end of the day, it's just trying to get started with what you think will help you the most and building on that, right? Instead of maybe doing too much at once.
And I think now there's so much information out there that we tend to get overwhelmed. At least I know I do, because there's so many right options that we tend to jump around. I definitely do that with my workouts in terms of not sticking to one thing. And really, I think with anything, the key is consistency. But I think we have so many options, and they all have the possibility of being correct, right? They're all right. It's just sticking with it long enough to actually see the benefit.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is like we get caught up in the comparison, like, oh, this person posts on social media that this is my morning routine. And then we think that, oh my God, I have to like wake up at 5 a.m. and have to do like go to spin class at 5:30. But I think I like what you said, like just having the 5 minutes to yourself is all you really need.
Yeah, exactly. Like you see all the people doing the cold plunges, and then
Yeah.
you see, okay, well, I have this morning routine. Do I need to incorporate? And it's just like, okay, for me at this point, that's not a reality. That's not something that's going to happen. Maybe in the future, but the, I have to create something that's sustainable. And for me, the 5 minutes inside my home, within my bedroom, what
Yeah.
can I do? And I think it's important to think about sometimes, what is it, not just what we can do, but what is it that we don't want to do? Like, I don't want to look at the phone. I don't want to do certain things. Like, that's important enough.
Yeah, I like the whole thing about the phone. I used to be really good. Like I would keep my phone in another room and I have like an alarm clock. But then on the weekends, I allow myself to just, for some reason, go to sleep with my bed in my bed with the phone. And then I use that for my alarm. And then, yeah, maybe I need to get better about that now that you brought that up.
I know, I agree with you. I'm in the same boat, and I think sometimes I will, instead of placing it on the nightstand, I'll like slip it over so that it falls onto the ground, so that it's a little bit less accessible. So it's not like I can just easily turn to it even in the middle of the night if I happen to wake up and
Yeah.
curiously wondering what time is it. It's one more step that's required for me to access it. And if I can just keep adding one more step, like one more barrier, then that thing I don't want to do becomes less likely. And if there's something I do want to do, like work out in the morning, then if I just have my workout clothes there instead of that phone, maybe that's what I'm going to turn to. Just make it even 5% more likely for me to do it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Adding more steps in with the bad habit and making the good habits easier to get into.
Yes, exactly. And I think that it's so much easier said than done, because we all have our strengths and our weaknesses, and what in terms of what how we are able to actually create those changes that we want.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really good to like just know that it's flexible, like don't be so hard on yourself. Consistency is the key and just start with something that you know you'll enjoy doing and then you can always change it up and add variety.
Exactly. I would just start with one thing,
Yeah,
and I think it's great to start something over even this winter break time, when even though that there's such a chaos that surrounds this holiday season, if you're able to just start with something, then maybe you've primed yourself to be able to set up this new change starting in January. Like, you've worked out some of your own kinks in terms of logistics.
yeah. Actually, this episode will probably go live in January. So I think, with that, with the new year too, it's a great way to maybe be like, oh, for this year, I want to make some changes, but starting with consistency and sustainable changes.
Yes. Yeah. And I think printing out one of those 30-day calendars, just like those free Google calendars, or just off the internet, can be so helpful, just to be able to see a check mark next to the days that you've done the item that you want to do, because our brain really likes to have a continuous pattern. It doesn't like to see a break. So if you look at it and you see 4 checks and then a blank space, sometimes that's the additional accountability or that motivation you need to just be able to do that small step. And if you're able to just keep going and keep going, it's more likely that you'll keep going.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes we think it's like, oh, I just need to be motivated, but it's different things, right? Like sometimes it's motivation that'll get you out of bed. Sometimes it will be that like accountability factor that, oh, like I've been so good for 4 days. Okay, I'll just do it for like today. And
Yes. Exactly. Because we always think that motivation comes first, but it actually follows
Mm.
some action step. So I think we just have to act, even if it's imperfect, even if it's 30 seconds or 15 seconds, just 5 seconds. Like we just have to take that initial step.
Definitely. Well, yeah, thank you for all the tips that you shared with us today. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention that we haven't covered in the conversation so far?
No, I think for everybody, this path to creating changes is something that is like a universal desire. And so I think being able to talk to a friend or a coach or somebody to help build in additional level of accountability can be really helpful, because sometimes they may be able to point out some barrier that's in your blind spot that you haven't really thought about. And so I think it's just interesting to have a conversation because maybe there's some tips that will help you.
No, that's a really good point. And I think like most of my listeners are women, like South Asian or minority background. And like I feel like in our culture, it's been like instilled in us that we have to be the ones to do everything. And like it's not okay to ask for help or get support. But I love that you pointed that out so that, like you said, maybe it's a different perspective you need, or it's something that you're overlooking because it's a habit that you've had for so many years. So leaning in for that support to make time for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's just like one click from a conversation that makes you realize like, oh, I could just change this one thing, and then you see this huge domino effect. So I always encourage people to just ask, and it's definitely not a sign of weakness. If anything, it's a sign of strength because it just shows how empowered you actually are.
Yeah, and how much like change you're willing to make to improve your life.
Yeah,
Definitely.
for sure.
Well, if viewers and listeners want to learn more about you and what you offer, where are some ways that they can connect with you?
Yeah, so you can feel free to email me at abangale@gmail.com. That's ABANGALE at gmail.com with any questions. I'm on Instagram at Anita underscore Bangale underscore, or my website, www.anitabangale.com. And yeah, you can shoot me a message and happy to help answer any questions.
Awesome. And I'll link all that in the show notes. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise and knowledge with us today.
Thanks so much, Emmy, for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And everyone, as always, be kind to yourself, be patient, and focus on progress, not perfection. And I'll see you in the next episode.